one and only Digo Double G. Da-da-da-da-da. You know I'm mobbing with the D-R-E.
So if by listening to the word thug, the first thing that comes to your mind are these videos of thug lives, then you need to watch and listen to this video to know actually who thugs were. One of the deadliest criminals of the time and in the history, the thugs. Today we often use the word thug for a bugler or a creep who has cheated us out of money. But there was time when these unknown and mysterious mischiefs haunted the dot paths of Indian subcontinent. Preying on native travelers, they looted and killed them. They believed in mysterious rituals and superstitions. They set themselves as a devotee of goddess Kali, a Hindu goddess. In the early 18th century, when the British Empire in India was in a very much process of being formed, to make India safe for colonization, the British had to first establish law and order. But when the British moved inside the subcontinent, they started hearing of a disturbing tale. Thousands of travelers have seemed to disappear in the Indian desolate road for centuries. In that time, it took a long time to travel between one town to the next. Merchants who sell their goods from one town to the next would have to travel long distance selling their goods, and it took months to come back to their original villages. And quite often, people didn't return. In a hushed town, people began speaking of a deadly underworld, an ancient fraternity of assassins known as Thuggi. The earliest account of the thugs date back to the mid 13th century, long before the British arrived in India. They joined bands of travelers posing as travelers themselves, and over the course of several days, the thug would befriend their fellow travelers, eating and drinking with them, gaining their confidence. Only then would they strike. One thug would distract the victim, and the other one would go behind with a yellow scarf and would kill them by strangulation, that is, by choking their neck with a yellow scarf. This rumal was their weapon and was a symbol of thug devotion to the Hindu goddess of destruction, Kali. Kali remained always, for the British imagination, very much a figure of terrifying Indianness. She is represented with the garland of head around her neck and various kind of instrument of destruction. The thugs used the myth of Kali to justify the preferred method of killing, strangulation. Each thug has a special role to play in the execution of the murder. Jamdar and Subedar were the top position among the thugs. Their operation starts with the Sota, who would gain information of people who are about to travel in the upcoming village. They targeted wealthy pilgrimage, merchants, wedding parties, bankers, and so on, people who would be likely to be carrying large sum of money. Over the course, they would become friendly with the fellow traveler. The Luka would look for a suitable place where the grave could be dug. Generally, a site on the outskirts and on a turn away from the road was chosen. The Bhila dug the grave. The Bhutto does the killing. They murder people in out of the places far away from the victim's home and took extraordinarily care to bury the victim very carefully with rocks on them so that no marauding animal could get their bodies.
Om Aim Hrim Klim Chamundaye Vichai. Om Aim Hrim Klim Chamundaye Vichai. Om Aim Hrim Klim Chamundaye.
The thugs were bound to their calling and each other by the variety of rituals and superstitions. But loyalty and faith went all the drove to the deadly mission. They were strange believers and followed superstition. They took signs of nature as good and bad signs. They would ask for direction to goddess Kali. The thug terror remained on the unguarded road of India for centuries. Thousands of travelers in the rural parts of India for years went missing, and nobody knew where they disappeared. Neither their bodies were found, nor does any trace of their presence, forcing a population into fearful silence. It is estimated that around 5,000 thugs accounted for around 30,000 deaths per year. The fanatic tale of this ghastly underworld would soon grasp the British imagination, and one young man in particular, an officer in the British Army, Sir William Henry Sleeman. Sir William Henry Sleeman, ambitious young officer who has genuine fineness for the people and culture of India. And in time, his interest would become a crusade, a relentless campaign to rid India of its murderous underworld, the Thugs. Sleeman arrived in India in 1809 at the age of 22. Even as a young man, he avoided the vices typically soldiers follow. He didn't drink and had nothing to do with prostitutes. Instead, he immersed himself in the culture, knowing several languages, including the local or the native one. He studied history and religion. While researching, Sleeman discovered a shocking report of bandits who practiced ritual murders and robbery. For years, these criminals were not known, but this British officer first unfolded the mystery of the Thug. According to the report, a group of criminals were being arrested in a series of murders. But an unbelieving British judge soon released them, saying that the accusations were too fanatic to be real. But Sleeman figured out something wrong. Intrigued, Sleeman approached a senior officer for more information. The British decided it wasn't their problem. It didn't affect them or their business in India. It was a very little backing available to Sir William Henry Sleeman to help him in his hunt for the thugs. Frustrated by the army bureaucracy, Sleeman transferred to civil services, becoming a magistrate in 1822. Empowered with judicial authorities, Sleeman vowed to put his attention on the eradication of the thugs. He travelled all over India, gathering the account of the villagers who have moved to fearful silence for generations. The truth discovered was ghastly. Thousands of murder every year, bodies buried in shallow graves.
Saib, dime, Gafadar, ¿qué has encontrado?
One such grave was discovered near Lucknow in Jabalpur, and all the bodies of the victim were found to have similar bruises on their neck. Pieces by pieces, Sleeman began to assemble the detailed portrait of the ancient sophisticated culture. In 1835, Sleeman was given a new position, General Superintendent for the suppression of the thugs. His headquarters was located in Jabalpur. Now he has the authority to arrest, imprison the suspect. Having already broken the code, Sleeman began rounding up thugs in large groups. He got to know more about Thuggy, their rituals, and their beliefs. In 1840, around 3,000 thugs were caught. 400 of them were executed. New laws gave Sleeman more power to arrest and interrogate not just thugs, but also someone who is suspected to be associated with the thugs. Number of thugs were caught, hanged, and deported. He even locked up entire families, housing many of them in the reformatory school in Jabalpur. Here thugs in deception were trained in fabric dyeing and carpet weaving. He rehabilitated the family member of the thugs and those who chose to join the mainstream. Dari Khana, where the stuff was made by the thugs. A market known as Itwari Market was being organized to sell the stuff made by the thugs. But nobody purchased from this Itwari Market, as who would purchase from the criminals? Sleeman ordered his cantonment area officer to purchase from them. And so the bazaar came to be known as Gorando Ka Bazaar and later as Gorandi in Jabalpur. The handmade market from the Dari Khana is still kept in a palace in Britain. Sleeman also worked for the sugarcane cultivation of the area. He did a number of reformatory work for the villagers. He knew many languages, including the local one. People, in his honor, name a place after him, known as Slimnabad, which is near to Jabalpur. In 1856, after 4 decades in India, Sleeman finally gets back home in Britain, where just after 9 days in sea, Sleeman died of a heart failure. He was 67-year-old. Sir William Henry Sleeman, earlier to whom his colleague would laugh and mock as Thuggy Sleeman, to his story of the thugs, was awarded with KCP, the highest honor of Britain. The colonial rule of India has been full of atrocities, repressions, and killings, but there were some who made this part of land as their homeland, understood its tradition, cultures, and demography, and Sleeman was one of them.